Good morning, Governor. Thank you for inviting us up to the residence here.
Good morning. It's great to have you.
Well, great. So,
it's a beautiful spot.
This is nice, isn't it?
It is.
So it was a year ago, I was recalling this, a year ago I talked to you here on this island. At that particular point in time, you had mounted a spirited campaign, but the political machine of Michigan didn't seem to be taking all that seriously.
No, we were the underdog, and we just kept plugging away. It's the same attitude that we have now. I didn't use the phrase then, but it's relentless positive action. You just don't get beat, and you focus on solving the problem, which is to reinvent Michigan.
Obviously, the message you had at that particular time, the campaign message, resonated with voters because you had a pretty easy time with voters getting through both the primary and then the general election. So what was it you were telling people that had them so fired up?
Well, it was about reinventing Michigan, that we're a wonderful state, but we were broken in terms of many of our systems or how we operate. And we were at the end of an era. If you go back in history, Michigan was the Silicon Valley of the United States back in the early part of the last century. And we were hugely successful on entrepreneurship, innovation, all those great things. But the challenge is, in some ways, we were too successful. We built in many different industries wonderful companies that were very successful, but then we didn't reinvent ourselves. And we sort of got too complacent, too content. And that led to a lot of these issues because it's not just been the last few years. We've gone through some difficult last decade, but we've been going downhill for 30, 40 years in many respects, and it's time to start that cycle again. Reinvention.
So you told people you were going to fix things, and how did you tell them during the campaign you were going to fix things?
Well, actually, I had a specific set of white papers that went through the various points, and I use that as a guideline as to what I do today, about getting rid of the Michigan business tax, about looking at different ways to do economic development, about balancing the budget. These are all things I talked about on the campaign because I'm trying to do the things I was hired to do.
And you said share sacrifice also.
I did, because it was about us being in this together. In the short term, many of us have to take a step back, and those are very difficult things. But it's so we can change our state dynamic. We've had a state that's been fighting over a shrinking pie for far too long, with too much win-lose attitude, where it's somebody winning and someone losing. And the only answer that really counts is we need to grow our economy. We need to create jobs. We need to grow the pie, and we need to win together. So it's changing that dynamic about fighting over the shrinking to say, let's grow and let's succeed together.
Now, you got voters all excited about that. Obviously, they elected you, and but then you started doing exactly what you said you were going to do, and you started asking people to share the sacrifice, and then suddenly you became a very unpopular guy here in Michigan among a lot of people. What happened?
It's change, and I knew that would come at some point because it's human nature. Everyone likes the concept of change until it arrives because it is a difficult process. I appreciate that, and when you're asking for sacrifices, that makes it difficult. So in many respects, the first reaction people have is, how am I negatively impacted and why I don't like it? And that's a normal reaction. In many respects, what you need to do is ask people to continue to look at the big picture of all the things we're trying to do, so they can see that short-term sacrifice is part of a big long-term benefit for us all. And when people started looking at the larger picture, which they have been, they get on board. They understand, yes, I can be part of this. Yes, I can deal with this change because it's for the better of all of us, because it's all about job creation and keeping our kids in Michigan.
A lot of politicians are very averse to the negative publicity. As soon as you hit one of those hot buttons, I mean, most politicians would go, oh, ouch, back off. You have not done so.
No, I'm doing the job I was hired to do, and I'm not a career politician. I'm here to do the right thing, and that was the mandate I had from the citizens of the state, is to say, we need to be reinvented, and these are tough times, these are tough decisions. This is not an easy job, and asking people to make a sacrifice is not easy. But I have confidence it's the right thing to do for all of us in the long term because it will create jobs and help keep our kids here.
At the beginning, there were a lot of protests out at the Capitol building. Do you see that whole idea gaining momentum, or is it dying down?
No, it's died down quite a bit. Because, again, I think you're going to see a first reaction from people that's the most negative. I think we'll get occasional protests. There are still tough things that need to be done. But as a practical matter, I believe the majority of citizens support what we're doing because it's about all our future together.
On our Detroit 2020 initiative, we've been discussing a number of issues, and you've been a part of that discussion. We appreciate that. I want to ask you a few questions about a few of them right now. Education, foremost, we're covering that topic right now. I heard you yesterday talking about how we need to be competitive, we need to be the best, we need to put forward the best people. The reaction I get from the educators in Michigan is, well, how in the world are we supposed to do that when you're cutting funding?
Yeah, well, that's, again, the first reaction of people, but the bigger question that's been missing for far too long, and I said this on the campaign trail very clearly, is too much of our system is focused on the dollars. And we have a failing education system in our state. It doesn't work right. It doesn't achieve the goals it needs to. We only have 16% of our kids that are college ready. That's a travesty. That's got to change. And so that's why we did a special message on education to say, let's reform the system. We have good people in the system, but the system has to be reformed to focus on student growth, student outcomes, and get it so these kids can succeed. And the dollars really should be focused on student growth as opposed to simply saying, let's spend money.
So throwing money at education is not the answer.
It's not the answer at all. I want to continue to invest more in education as we get our economy rolling, but it needs to be really looking at how that's achieving student growth. Spending money for the sake of spending money is not an answer in any part of our government. It's about value for money, showing real results to real citizens. In the kids' case, it's watching those kids grow and having them either be college ready or career ready, because we are failing at that far too often today.
I have a Facebook message somebody posted on my page the other day and said, ask the governor, what did we do to face the wrath of the governor? She's a teacher.
Again, I respect teachers. Actually, if you look at our message, I brought information, actually a survey from the American Federation of Teachers. They were asking for many of the same things we asked for in this message, about better evaluations, better feedback. I've talked about creating a master teacher category where we can actually reward and compensate the very best teachers so they don't want to necessarily even become an administrator. Let's keep them as teachers if they want to be there. So it's actually very much focused on success, but it's measurable success of our teachers and our students.
The Emergency Financial Managers Act that you passed, one of the first things you signed into law as governor. We asked you this question when you were on the air with us during our roundtable, and I asked a very pointed question to Mr. Bing, the mayor. I said, are you worried that perhaps the governor's going to replace you with emergency financial manager? And Mr. Bing says, no, I'm not. Well, it seems like it's changed. Now they're starting to find themselves kind of in this position where maybe, do you think you may be sending in an emergency financial manager to Detroit?
That's clearly not the goal, and that's just speculation at this point, because the good part about the legislation we put in, it put in a whole early warning system about how we can work with communities, because my goal is to avoid ever needing an emergency manager, because that's a failure point. So it really gives us an ability to have dialogue with communities and understand their issues before you reach that break point. So the goal is to clearly work with the city and all our communities to say, how can you avoid that status? How can you deal with your financial issues on your own and work through those problems and succeed?
In the series of warnings right now, where is the city of Detroit in relationship to the state of Michigan?
Well, it's very early in that process. So there are a number of steps that would go through first, and we haven't even gotten to those. There would be a review team, then you have a consent agreement, and we're at neither one of those stages today.
So right now there's no warning triggers have tripped yet?
Well, we're just in good dialogue with them about the budget process they're going through. We're trying to address some of the issues with the census. So I'm glad to see a couple bills going through the legislature now to allow them to continue the existing income tax and utilities tax.
So could you say right now that there will not be an emergency financial manager sent into Detroit, or is it a possibility?
It's just speculation at this point.
You mentioned the census, and unfortunately Michigan has the distinction of being the only state to lose people. How do you fix that?
Well, that's what we're doing with the whole program, because one way to keep people here is to have jobs. And that's not only important for keeping our young people here, but people that have otherwise been forced to leave. So if you come back to a lot of these issues, the census was really a wake-up call, I hope, for people to put it in perspective, to say we were the only state to lose population. It just reinforces the importance of reinvention, job creation, and keeping our kids here.
It also would seem to reinforce your mantra of consolidation. It's time to start getting people working together and spending less to get more done.
Yeah, that's something we can do in the public sector, and we should be doing. We can be more efficient on how we operate, and that's about service sharing and service consolidation. And we've provided incentives for municipalities. Now we're talking about for the schools, about how they can share services to reduce cost and give better service. And that's something we should all be doing, and the state should be part of that process.
Another issue we've been covering on Detroit 2020 is the city itself, Detroit. How does it reinvent itself? And it seems like a lot of what you're trying to do in Michigan really is something that Mr. Bing has paid attention to. I mean, in fact, during our roundtable with the two of you, it was surprising to see how often you agreed, far more often than you disagree. So apparently you're on the same page about this idea of reinventing Detroit. I mean, what do you suggest Mr. Bing do that is working for you here?
Well, it's the same kind of process, and I think they're working hard on reinvention in Detroit, and we want to be supportive, because again, my role as governor is to help all our communities across Michigan, and so I really want the mayor and the city council to know we're there to be a resource and to share ideas about what we're doing, and I think we're setting a good path. By getting the budget done on a very timely basis, we're able to give them more certainty when they do their budget. We're helping them on the issues with the census. There's a lot of activities on a broad number of fronts that I want to cooperate with the mayor and the city council on.
Transportation is one of the issues that seems vital to Detroit, and they're trying to get the light rail system going. That thing has been just fitting and starting for years and years and years. They promised they're going to break ground on something soon. What is it the state can do to help them get that done?
Well, it's to be part of that dialogue and to help them work with the federal government on the funding and the private sector to see all that come together. And anything we can do in terms of permits or approvals that they need from the state, how can we do that in a very quick and efficient process? And we want to look at how we could tie all our transportation systems together. So we actually did well in terms of getting some federal dollars for enhanced speed rail for the state. That could tie right into the M1 system to say, can we look at commuter trains then? Say from Ann Arbor to Detroit, Detroit to Pontiac. There's good opportunity there to tie all those things together.
Do you have a vision as governor of what kind of transportation system you'd like to see here in Michigan in a fairly short term?
Well, in short term, one of the main things we need to do is we need to get our current system up to standards. I mean, everyone will agree we have way too many potholes, we have way too many failing bridges. So my view is it's not about new construction, it's about getting what we have to be in much better condition, and so that's where we need to invest.
Oh, you said that word bridge, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, you wear the button, build the bridge.
I've got the button. Yeah, we do need the new international trade crossing. It's a great opportunity for all of us. It's about international trade. Canada has been a fabulous partner for us, and it's a huge part of our economy. We have over about 240,000 jobs in Michigan currently tied to our export trade with Canada. If we build another crossing, that just gives us an opportunity to see that number go up dramatically. So let's get this bridge built.
Okay, so building the bridge is one thing. Who builds the bridge is the second thing.
Yeah.
The Ambassador Bridge owners currently believe that they have a better plan. Well, first of all, baffling a lot of people is they say we don't really need a second bridge.
Yeah, we need a second bridge. There is demand long term. We went through a tough time where you saw some decline, but we've seen a big jump. Our exports to Canada in the last year from 2009 to 2010 went up over 30% in 1 year alone. And as we build this crossing, it creates more opportunity because Canada is actually doing some really intriguing things with their infrastructure for the whole country that they want to have better access to the United States, and their choices are either the Niagara area or the Detroit area. So Niagara is going to benefit if we don't take advantage of this opportunity for us to create those jobs.
Now, yesterday, Matthew Maroon says traffic on the bridge is down. I think he said 40% since its peak. So even the people who run the bridge say the traffic is down. Yet you say traffic is up or going up?
Short term, it's bounced back strong. Again, there was a dip because of the recession, but that's part of the normal curve. But the long-term trend here is to say there's good opportunity for international trade. And the best part of what we're proposing is we're talking about creating an authority. Ultimately, the bridge would be built by a private party and run by a private party. So the private sector will validate that the traffic numbers are there to actually put it in perspective to say the free market believes we need another crossing and we should do this.
Would you welcome the Maroon family to be that private company to build that other bridge?
Well, they should compete. Again, that's the good part about this. It's free enterprise and they're welcome to compete for this. It's interesting if you look at other places, though. If you go to Niagara, for example, they actually have many more lanes and they have less traffic than we do, and they have 4 viable crossings. So the way I describe it is, I'm not anti-anyone, I'm pro-international trade, and by adding this crossing, it's just a benefit for all Michiganders.
So again, back to the Ambassador Bridge people, they believe that they're being vilified somehow. They say, well, yeah, we understand if you want a bridge, we're willing to build a bridge, and we'll give you a deal that's every bit as good or better than the offer of the Canadians giving you $500 million to build a bridge. I mean, what's wrong with the Ambassador Bridge's offer?
Well, again, they don't have a real offer on the table that would match the Canadian situation at all, and it's a good partnership with Canada. Again, the Ambassador Bridge can be a viable entity, and let's create good, fair competition on this other bridge and let free enterprise work. And that's the way I view it in terms of a good opportunity. And the best part about the program we have now, with the Canadian investment, the way they were willing to work with us, is it wouldn't put any obligation or debt on our taxpayers at all. that's a wonderful opportunity where we would have no debt, we'd have no ongoing costs. It would really come through the performance of the bridge to pay back all those dollars. And so it's a great opportunity that actually creates opportunity in the rest of Michigan. By the investment structure we've come up with, it would allow us to have more federal road dollars for other parts of Michigan and allow us to match those dollars with the Canadian investment that they would do as part of this bridge project. It's a huge win. This is one of those situations we shouldn't walk away from.
Last question is about Mackinac on this conference up here, right? What's interesting, I think, is how much involvement you personally have had in shaping the dialogue up here. What's your intention at the end of this conference?
Well, we have a much clearer discussion and dialogue with specific action items, because it's about taking action. Last year, I think they made a major move forward in terms of being more action-oriented, and we want to continue that, because the history of the conference, why it was a great conference, it was more about meeting and talking. I don't believe in just meeting and talking. I believe in action, and I believe the leadership at the Chamber does too, and so we're being good partners in this process.
I'm moderating a panel today that includes DMC, Meritor, and American Axle. And these guys talking about what they did personally as businesses to rebound from 08 and 09. Is there anything that you're learning from them here that you're putting in your playbook?
Oh, sure, because they did make some major restructuring. The private sector did. And so those are some of the lessons about best practice we're bringing to the public sector, about the healthcare costs, about going to 80-20, about service consolidation, service sharing, about providing better services at a lower cost, and taking better care of our citizens. A great illustration of a comeback is Ford Motor. I mean, talk about a company that went through tough times, that rebuilt itself, that reinvented itself without going through bankruptcy. That's a great model for what we should be doing at the state.
I asked Dick Dowk this question yesterday. I said it's one thing for a company to restructure itself because you may have your shareholders, but you don't have voters. I mean, you've been in the private sector and you've dealt with shareholders, but you didn't have to necessarily deal with voters. As governor, you've got a much larger group of people you've got to make happy.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm attempting to do in many respects, and I feel reasonably good about it. These are tough calls, and asking people for sacrifice is not easy at all. But as a practical matter, I believe I've been doing the things I campaigned on, and that's what I was hired to do. And so I'm just trying to do that in good faith, and it's not about me, it's about we. One of the big things I want to do is really create a culture. It's not about blaming anyone for anyone. It's not about taking credit for anything. It's about relentless positive action to simply say, we've had some of these problems for decades, these structural problems. Here's the problem. Here's a solution. Let's get it done, and let's move on to the next problem and create that win environment where we're creating jobs and keeping our kids in Michigan. That's exciting.
I promised that was the last question, but you brought up one point I got to ask you about. You said it's not about me, it's about we. Well, unfortunately, at the legislature, it's about you and the Republicans and the Democrats. I mean, so far, every vote has been right down party lines. Is there going to be a point when you see the Democrats start coming aboard?
Well, the bridge could be a good illustration of that. And actually, we've already had one. If you look at the Detroit income tax and the Detroit utilities tax, that's a case of people working together. So there are a number of cases, and I respect the Democrats and the Republicans both. And we go through that process through committee hearings. The legislature does. We get input and thoughts where we're listening all the time. I'm trying to incorporate good ideas regardless of the party. When the votes come, it may not show up that way. But it's part of being a good listener is to say, how can we continuously improve and make it so we're Michiganders as opposed to different people?
And down the road is what you're doing. You say it's starting to work. The unemployment's coming down, and taxable income may start coming up. Do you see the Democrats at some point saying, oh, well, it's working, maybe we ought to get on board?
Well, what I'm trying to do is I think we have some good messages in the fall that are good common ground areas like infrastructure, like
right.
roads and bridges. Health and wellness is on our agenda, and then workforce development, talent. Those are all areas that as Michiganders we should all want to move forward together on. We still will probably have some differences, but the core substance is those are win-wins for all of us.
Okay. I promised that was the last question, so this is it. We do appreciate you taking the time for us, though.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here.
And I'd like to sit around here with you on the porch here for the next couple of hours. It's a beautiful day.
It's great to talk to you, Stephen.
All right. Thank you very much, Governor.